Heyo, we are back. It's a wonderful Wednesday. I spent 6 hours last night on Spaces listening to everybody's concerns. The dictatorship of ordinals basically saying BRC20 sucks. We're getting rid of it. And you guys are stuck without numbers. And so now you're going to have to go fork your own protocol. Adam, where were you? I was waiting for you. That's
bro. It was late. I did not have 6 hours to spare, man. I know how these things go, man. And it is just, maybe I'm too old to get into this sort of like, I feel like we've had these discussions so many times. And honestly, with ordinals, like, dude, this is like at least the third time, like the entire community has had this debate. And, we were calling for him to make the call and move forward when it was still relatively early. It's now been kicked down the road for like another 6 months. And, there wasn't a great decision to be had back then. And there certainly isn't now. But this, I don't know, for me, like we can get into some details, but for me, the devs, when I hear, oh, numbers don't matter, dude, go fuck yourself. Like they don't understand what makes this whole thing work. Like they literally don't get it. And so to that point, I have nothing really to say other than they just don't get it. Right. And so I don't know. Tell me what happened in the spaces, man.
Oh yeah, I'll give a synopsis. First, I want to say GM to Chris. What's good, bro? I saw you hanging out. I think you were hanging out in there for a little bit, right?
GM. Yeah, I was definitely in there, following it all as it always goes. It was said a bunch of times, but it's still super early in these things, and so still working out the kinks. So those early sessions, they must seem like more as therapy sessions than actually like productive work. Like everyone just screaming and yelling, but there's going to be no resolution in like the immediate future. So it's kind of like, it's good to plan, but a lot of it's just therapy, people ranting, and then, none of that will even get implemented in the first place. But always good to hear people's opinions for sure.
Yeah, I put a tweet out. I said, it's really this debate of technical debt versus social capital. And somebody quote tweeted it and said, this is the situation of every intense Bitcoin issue.
Sure.
Is that the devs are tired of maintaining, horrible code. And this was actually brought up. And then the early adopters who, built everything off of, their social reputation is now being kind of infringed upon. So it's that issue is the same thing with the block wars. Ex-CEO, what is good? I first want to say this man quote tweeted me earlier and said, this is the first time I've ever agreed with Jake. Oh, man, my horrible takes all over the
time. What's good, my man? You said something. You said that the original goal was to bring the fun back to Bitcoin, right? That's what Casey Rodemer said, and Ordinals brought the fun back, and inscription numbers are fun. And I don't know if any of you guys watched the podcast, with Casey and Erin, the lady who was interviewing him, and the way the insensitivity in which they were discussing, for instance, BRC20s, and then the statement which they said, like, inscription numbers are like a shit coin. Like, I'm thinking like these two people, I mean, who made them CEO of Ordinals? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is, I mean, I've spent a ton of Bitcoin, tens of thousands of US dollars worth of Bitcoin buying early inscription numbers. You can't just tell me that's a shitcoin. That's culture. Inscription numbers are fun. They're culture. They make it nice. We call it digital artifacts, right? Meaning they're digital collectibles. It's easy even for grandma to understand, like, oh, that's inscription one. He was like, yeah, I'm going to sell my inscription 0 if you give me 1,000 Bitcoin, whatever. You know what I'm saying? He wants to make money off his early inscription, right? But why does he want to destroy the entire numbering? So he's out of touch with the culture. That's how I see it, So I've got my baby here. I'm kind of babysitting, But I just want to say inscription numbers are culture, man. And they ain't good. If we have to fork ordinals, we're going to have to fork it. You know what I'm saying? That's my take on it.
Ooh, spicy hot takes.
Love that take, bro. Love it.
Casey, Casey was definitely prepared for this. I don't think there's any doubt about it. In the same day, he put a blog post out, an hour and a half long podcast, and then also commented on some of the tweets as well. So he knew this is coming. I mean, he's a very intelligent guy. I think with Casey too, he has this kind of sarcastic shit posting type humor where sometimes the things that he's saying is not, it's not his true intent. It's more to troll and lol around. But on Bitcoin, it's a more serious type community and it gets lost. Oh, Adam, you would have loved it. I went on stage yesterday when they let me up with like Udi and all of them. There's like 400 people in there. And I was like, I'm glad the Bitcoin community can finally reconsider that a rollback is sometimes necessary. And Leo was the only one that laughed. Oh, dude, it was so funny. I was like, damn, all right, that did not land.
Well, I haven't listened to the podcast yet, but obviously I know Casey and know how, kind of trite he can be. And it's not cool when it's, to XCO's point, it's not cool when he's being trite about stuff that, he laid this foundation for, and we're supposed to bring, make Bitcoin fun again. We're building on top of Bitcoin. We're doing stuff on top of Bitcoin. And it's like, oh no, all that shit is meaningless. And we're just going to do this. You see how this goes. It's there aren't easy answers here. But again, we put this off now for whatever, 8 months. And here we are again. And well, I mean, it doesn't sound like it's being handled in maybe the best way, which isn't surprising because these things are really, really complicated and hard. But yeah, I don't know, man. It sounds like a bit of a shit show.
So let's really like dive into like why is this being brought up again? Like why is it needed? It sounds like it's purely for a technical upgrade, which makes sense. But also Casey then has to go renege on his post, which was from February 17th, where he says socially, right? This is kind of a social agreement between him and the community, saying that inscription numbers are immutable and they're not going to change. So I think this is where a lot of people feel, lied to, and that broken.
I mean, he tried to. I don't know if you saw the tweet. He tried to brush it off as like, oh, I was drunk or whatever. Did you see that tweet?
No, I didn't see that, but Leo had brought it up, and we were talking about this last night. We, as historical nerds, we like to try to compare things to kind of different situations that's happened in the past. And the only other two situations I could think of was the Ethereum fork and the CryptoPunks V2 airdrop. And then I grouped in the numbering. If ordinals drop the numbering, this would be a third situation to where all of these decisions were made by a founder to make sure that their life's work keeps breathing.
Yep.
And to upgrade the protocol. But they have to make that decision knowing that they're going to incur a massive debt in social capital between them and the community. And that usually these types of decisions end up proving to be right, at least, for the long-term health of the protocol. But it creates this severance between them and the community because the trust is broken and they've been lied to. And it's going to be, somewhat of a stain on your decision-making as a leader going forward. When you go back and people think about or talk about Vitalik, the thing they always point to is the rollback and how intense of a situation that was. Same with CryptoPunks. Anytime somebody wants to go, find something to FUD about for Larva Labs, it's the V2 Punk airdrop, right? And so this could potentially be a similar situation. What do you think about that comparison, Adam?
I mean, I think it's accurate. The thing is, this is happening in real time, so that's the differentiator with like what happened with the V2 Punks, right? Because that was like we're arguing about that kind of not in real time, not as it actually occurred, right? So it's actually much more similar to like the Ethereum fork, although it's not a fork, right? I actually put the if you look in the Discord, I put that link to what Casey kind of brushed off Leo's point and Leo calling him out on his tweet about like the immutability of the numbers, right? So if you scroll up, you'll see Leo's tweet. And
it says, bro, you got to quote all the caps. Or it says, bro, you got to quote the all caps tweet. It's a way better dunk.
Yeah.
So he's dunking. So he's dunking on people, not drunk.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. I misread. I'm not a big reader, bro. Yeah, you're right. Oh, my bad. Yeah. So but from like that perspective, that very perspective right there, this is actually one of the great things about Bitcoin is that the leader's gone, right? I mean, anytime you still have the leader involved where, you got the feeling that this is basically a done deal and has already been decided by Casey and the handful of guys that, work with him. And I think a lot of people get that feeling. And when that happens, people are like, wait a minute, I thought this was decentralized. I thought this, and it turns out, well, it really isn't. I mean, the tech may be decentralized, but the people controlling the tech are not. And so there's a lot of debates, like the entire crypto space has to have these kind of debates. And this is one that's just thrown in right in front of us. And most of us weren't around for the Ethereum fork, and haven't been through that, or the block size wars. A lot of people weren't around for the block size wars. And so, haven't been through this kind of thing, but this happens in crypto all the time. And so, being able to hash through, and the reality is, I mean, Casey needs to understand, if he just bull rushes this through, there will always be a stark division, and he will lose a lot of the community. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think the worst thing that you want is a fork to happen. When you look at the Bitcoin fork to the Bitcoin Cash fork that happened, you had some of the mining power had left for the hash wars, and then you had developers leave for Bitcoin Cash. You had capital leave for Bitcoin Cash, and then on the Bitcoin side, you had developers leave to Ethereum, and you had investors leave to Ethereum because they had a sour taste left in their mouth from just the social war that had happened. So it felt like no one really won, right? Because what happened to Bitcoin right after the fork? For about 5 years, there was no developer activity, and it created this, Bitcoin maximalist take where they had to really dive in and dig their teeth in or dig their, their shoes into the ground and say, this is what Bitcoin is. And a lot of people disagreed with that very heavily. And it really, really hindered Bitcoin's progress. And this is why you see Ethereum caught up in all these other protocols while everyone else was very angry. Yep. But moving into like, why is this happening? So the main technical upgrade that they had brought up, there could be other ones as well, is this idea of multiple inscriptions per transaction. And it had to do with parent-child inscriptions. So, Danny was supporting this, and it completely makes sense because he's migrating his on-chain monkeys, and he wants to be able to migrate them under, the parent of that first sat where he minted the hash of all of them, right? So if this doesn't get pushed through, then this affects his bags as well. Yeah. So there is some bias there, of course. And it's for a technical upgrade. And so they want to be able to, inscribe things very quickly, which makes sense. And to me, it sounds like if you're going to sacrifice, a large amount of culture capital that exists there and burn people.
Can I butt in, man? Like a
hold on, bro. Hold on.
Can I dig
hold on.
All right.
Please don't cut me off. All right, where was I going with this?
You were talking about if you're going to sacrifice a large amount of social capital.
Yeah, well, yeah. If you're going to sacrifice that, then you need to have some sort of plan on the other side of where this is going to go. And how I'm looking at it or projecting it is that they want to move past, or at least the dev team, which rightfully so. They want to move past this idea of like retail phase, and they want to kind of move into this, more professionalized protocol that maybe gets adopted by or is more attractive to larger projects, maybe to institutions, right? You have Mocha and an Animoca brand subsidiary is moving in. These type of large developer teams with large amount of capital, they need a very efficient product. And if this is making the product less efficient, right, then it's going to deter them away from coming in. And so this is, I think it's, there's like a little give and tug of that relationship. Go ahead, XCO.
So I very much respect what your takes on this, but I want to point and highlight the problem, ladies and gentlemen, is a gentleman called Casey Rodarmor. Okay, just like emperors who found empires, like Caesar. Caesar ended up invading the very country that actually gave him it gave him his right to power, but he invaded Rome. Do you understand what I'm saying? And that's set.
You're saying he's basically shitting on the people who built everything he has.
Like Caesar. Okay, we have to stop Caesar in his foot. Remember how Caesar, it ended with Caesar. He was stabbed to death. I'm not saying stabbed Caesar to death, okay? I'm just saying, but when Rome had enough of Caesar, Julius Caesar, even Brutus, you too, Brutus, they stabbed him. Why? For the sake of Rome, so that Rome could continue. Now, if you look at the statements of Casey, let's move away just a little bit from the inscription numbers. If you listen to the podcast, he was actually fading very hard BRC20, and BRC20 is one of the reasons we have over 30 million inscriptions, right? We have all this liquidity that moved into Bitcoin and all this interest, all the media writing about it and all that stuff. We have to give credit to BRC20. I remember in the early days, because I was kind of early to this protocol, and when the frogs were minting, when they were inscribing the frogs, but at the same time the frogs were being inscribed, they were also inscribing, Sats names. And Casey made a video where he was with another lady. I don't know which one it was, but he was fading hard, the Sats name, saying, this is like ugly and whatever, But he was like, yeah, I like the frog. So Casey has a fetish for PFPs, okay? He doesn't like JSON files for some reason, Whether the JSON file is a Sats name, whether it's a BRC20. He was saying in the podcast that he actually doesn't want BRC20s to appear on ordinoswallet.com. You know what I'm saying? Like he would actually ban that and censor that from appearing and just have like PFPs appearing. And Casey actually had kind of said, I'm going away from ordinals, and he appointed a guy called Ruff. And Ruff was the guy who was actually kind of running things, and Ruff has a good way with the community, and in his communication, he's not as, like Caesar type of character, right? And all of a sudden, he brings himself back into the conversation when we had sort of written him off and said, okay, he was the founder, he did this, blah, blah, okay, he's moving away. He made tweets like that, you know what I'm saying? And overnight, he comes back, injects himself back into the conversation with the most outrageous proposition, in my opinion. So just like Caesar.
So to summarize, you're saying he leaves, goes out, Raph comes in, who we all know as kind of the lead dev, manages things with the softer touch, a little more community oriented. And then Casey comes back, and your feeling is Casey's coming back basically as the bully, and bullying.
Exactly. You wrap it up exactly. And he's out of touch. The thing is, when he was away from Ordinals, he's out of touch with the culture. Yeah. He doesn't understand that inscription numbers is culture. You get what I'm saying?
Let's be clear. He doesn't understand NFT culture at all. Like at all. Right. I mean, we saw that.
Exactly.
We saw that within
Ordinals culture, man.
Yeah.
You don't get it. You don't understand it. You know what I'm saying? He's out of touch with that. Somebody needs to help him to get back in touch with the culture.
Casey, my phone line's open, brother. No, I mean, I don't disagree with you. And I think we've seen it a couple times when he was on whatever, that CoinDesk show. He was really rough.
The funniest interview I've ever seen.
Yeah, really rough towards Counterparty, Pep. I mean, just really rough. And, super Bitcoin maxi style rough. And I get it. I get it completely. Like, to just shit on all these people who've literally put millions of dollars behind a protocol you've built. It just feels mean-spirited, right?
Man, we need to fire him. Casey is fired. Okay, deliver the memo. We said it. We, the people, have spoken. We don't need him. He's fired. We don't need his leadership. I think the community can do a better job. You know what I'm saying?
Step down.
I mean, he needs, okay, that might be an extreme statement to make, but what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, is the following. The gentleman is out of touch with the culture. Yeah. And because he's out of touch with the culture, I would rather he leave things in the hands of Ruff. Ruff has been doing a fantastic job, you know what I'm saying? And I think Casey just needs to chill. You understand what I'm saying? And for us who understand the culture, don't mess around with the matrix, man. Leave it as it is. Those historical inscriptions are super important. You know what I'm saying? And inscription numbers make it easy for collectors. I've, like I said, I'm not concealing the fact that I've spent a ton of Bitcoin, buying early inscriptions, and because they're early inscriptions.
We get it, man. We get it. Like this is
behind it and a narrative.
We get it. This is the discussion that we've had a bunch in the HNFT space. And look, there are a lot of people who don't believe in HNFTs, right? They think it's all stupid, right? And I'm sure Casey's probably one of them, right? So, it is what it is at the end of the
historical
day.
NFT community is the first person.
He's an anarchist, and I respect that. I'm a free speech Marxie, and I like that he speaks his mind. He's an anarchist, and as an anarchist, I think he's a bit on the extreme edge where he would literally torch his own boat, like torch his own bridges, like Caesar did when Caesar was invading Britain.
Yeah.
And his troops wanted to run away, because they were having a hard time. And Caesar torched his own boats, man, so that his troops had no option but to fight. There are people like that, but, in the end, Caesar, they had to get rid of him, okay? In as much as Caesar is the founder of Rome or whatever, but get rid of him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally, man. Jake, I got to bounce, unfortunately. I could, man.
You're going to talk with Art Gnome, right?
Yeah, about Lost
Rob. I'll be here. I'm going to continue on with this kind of conversation. I actually find it really.
Yeah, I have to also bounce soon, man. I need to go and eat a bird, man. I'm eating chicken. So I just wanted to say, Jack, for the first time I agreed with you on your tweet, and when you say that inscriptions are fun, keep it on there, man, and elaborate. What do you mean inscriptions are fun? You know what I'm saying? For us who know the culture, we know what that means. You know what I'm saying? And if you take away the inscription numbers, you take away the fun. And I think you should sort of this whole space talk about why inscription numbers are fun. You know what I mean? And why Casey doesn't understand that this stuff is fun. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I don't take as much of a critical position on Casey. I do believe he's actually very aware of what's going on. This is why he prepared for it. I think if Casey was out of touch, he wouldn't have posted an hour-and-a-half podcast, a long blog post, and posted in the GitHub all on the same day without being very aware of what's about to come with making this post. So, I do understand if you want to treat him as a Caesar. He did say, right, he is going against a handful of, social agreements that he made with the community. And now he has to go against it to, basically improve the protocol, or at least in his perspective. That's what he's doing. He has the loudest voice. He has every right to, speak his own mind. At the end of the day, it is a protocol. The worst thing that can happen here is if a fork happens and you split the community. I don't think anyone really wins in that situation. So if you read Danny's posts of On-Chain Monkey, he has a handful of pretty good intermediary kind of agreements. I don't know if that's ultimately the right decision, but to me, that's where it seems like this is kind of leaning towards. At the end of the day, one of my favorite hilarious takes actually was from Businessman, talking about quad keys and how the guys over at Luxor were basically trying to be the moral authority of saying, this is the right decision. And then Businessman says, how the fuck do you disagree with BRC20 when you're shilling quad keys? And I don't know. I just found that absolutely hilarious. If anybody else wants to come on stage too and chat, please do, because Adam ditched me to go talk with Art Gnome. If you don't know him, he's like a legendary art collector. But one thing that didn't get brought up yesterday, and I tried to bring this up during when I was in the bigger space, and no one really seemed to talk about it. That same day, or literally like maybe 2 hours after that post, Casey goes on to create a post and talks about writing a meta protocol on top of his inscriptions. It says, use the new meta protocol field to declare your inscription's meta protocol outside of the inscription body. This potentially makes meta protocol indexers faster, allowing them to skip inscriptions that aren't relevant, as well as allowing general purpose inscription indexers to better support displaying and sorting meta protocol inscriptions without needing to inspect the inscription bodies. I think the intention here is that, you post something highly controversial, but then you also tease something in front of the community of saying, this is where the protocol could go if, we remove numbers. I think you'll probably see a handful more things like this pop up of different types of ideas and different things that can happen if they do remove the numbers. But, at the end of the day, it's still really to be determined. Unfortunately, in my honest opinion, I think the writing is on the wall. I think the decision's really been made already. But it's still going to take a while for people to get to where we need to go. Danny's proposal, the one at least that seems to have the most support behind it, is inscribing the numbers. So he said an arbitrary number of 50. He said at inscription 50 million, we'll basically take a snapshot of 0 through 50 million inscriptions, and then we'll inscribe it right into the protocol so that the historical value of these numbers exist and you can verify it on chain. And then after inscription 50 or 50 million, then all of the numbers are dropped, and then they continue on with this new protocol. It's an awkward middle where everyone wins and loses at the same time. You can kind of etch your OG-ness, I guess, into that field and saying, I own something 1 through 50 million. But if you look at it from, a collectability standpoint, you want the numbers to continue, right? It's better saying, yeah, I own inscription 6969, out of 1 billion inscriptions versus, yeah, I own inscription 6969 out of 50 million in this period of, before numbering and after numbering, whatever you want to call it, BN and AN. And right. So, and then once you move into this new world of, once you move into this new world where there's no numbering, you de-emphasize the inscription number, and then it becomes more akin to the Ethereum NFT ecosystem. And I think this is where a handful of concerns were being brought up from a handful of the community, but it didn't really get touched on because I think when you're in those bigger spaces, anytime you bring up ETH NFTs, people tend to try to, look down on it or try to, look past it, I guess. Chris, I'd be curious on your take. What do you think's the right decision here? I know you dabble on, Solana more than anything, but you've been in the space for a long time. Bitcoin, we've always talked about Bitcoin for years, about how we love it. What do you think's the right decision here?
Yeah, it's definitely pretty tough, right? They kind of got themselves in kind of a pretty tough situation. But I would say that obviously a fork is pretty much the worst case scenario. Totally agree with you on that part. It's going to be tough. I think that, it's pretty clear that they're kind of already in the works of making their decisions. You already said that Casey kind of, he prepared, he had the podcast out, he had the blog post up, he had the GitHub up. So he was ready for the debate, and he knew that there was going to be a ton of backlash. But at the same time, he kind of has a hard stance, and that's kind of always been kind of his attitude towards it. And so I kind of see him taking it in exactly the direction that it's kind of going already.
Yeah. This is the improvement of the protocol, and man, it sucks. There's a culture war.
It's tough though. I agree with Adam. I mean, that's the problem with having, head of a protocol rather than having a decentralized protocol, is that you're not always going to be able to make everyone happy. And so when you have, when you're without a leader, the community has to act on its own as one unit. But when you have a unit, a head unit, then the community can be split and have different opinions and try and push their will one way or the other. So it's a difficult spot that he's in. I think that it's inevitable that a bunch of people are going to be upset, and I'm sure that a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money, which is the worst part about it, and that the community will probably end up being pretty split. But I think that that's kind of the reality that we're at the moment.
Fork it. I think that I think the debate's going to go on for probably weeks. It's going to get beat to death at the end of the day, and there's going to be some proposals. There will eventually be a compromise. I did Soul, who just joined, had an interesting proposition of inscribing the ID directly into the sats in the metadata field, which is an interesting kind of proposition. It does still, it shows a unique identifier on chain, but it still removes that collectability, which I think is really one of the key components here of the, kind of this social argument. And the reason why I say this is I've seen this happen once with the Mooncat community, where all the Mooncats that were created, the 25,000 of them, they all have a unique identifier that's their on-chain DNA. And originally, we first started collecting those when Mooncats first were rediscovered, and then very fast people started collecting off of that serial number, and then a few months later ditched it for something else, and it just becomes this revolving door of you're unsure what makes it unique. And I guess it probably falls similar into this like rare sat category, where it's like, everything can be rare and cannot be rare at the same time, depending on who you're convincing is rare or makes it rare, right? With these social clubs, which is a new dynamic that's kind of similar to ENS as well. But I really don't know what's going to happen here. Again, I do think it seems pretty tough that there's going to be, big W for the collectible side of everybody, just because it has the improvement of the protocol is really what's at stake here. I guess Danny probably has, the best. He's probably the best medium between both sides, and he's the one that seems to be offering multiple options of compromise, not just a situation, but just historically throughout the ordinal community. He has one of the best fundamental understandings of both sides. So it will be to be determined, but the conversation will get beat to death until everybody really figures it out.
Yeah, everyone always talks in circles. It feels like it'll be going on for weeks, all day, all night for sure. It'll be the topic du jour. There's no doubt about it. That's one of the problems with everything being mega financialized, and everyone just has so much bag bias. They don't really take into account what's the best for the protocol going forward. Like ordinals are so early, and it has the potential to impact millions of people in the future, whereas there's like thousands at best in ordinals right now. So obviously it's in its earliest stages, and it's good to go through these growing pains early, and some people are going to be upset along the way. A lot of this is just new tech, so there's going to be growing pains, but yeah, it's definitely going to be a long road. And it's tough to see the bigger picture when you have big bags that might be impacted, but
the heaviest bags
are going to be a huge thing. So,
dude, bro, the heaviest bags. One of the concerns, and I guess I addressed this because they didn't really talk about this much. When I first saw that they were getting rid of numbers, I thought, oh, this was going to completely destroy all the meta protocols that exist, where BRC20, Bitmap, SNS, etc. Domo came out yesterday, who's the creator of BRC20, and he said the issue has nothing to do with inscription numbers. It's the retroactive addition of cursed content, similar to Ethereum randomly deciding that a bunch of failed transactions are suddenly valid. Nothing is at risk, as there will be solutions. There will be solutions regardless of the proposal decision. And also, Benny from Track also said something very similar, where if you've built a meta protocol on top of ordinals, you will have to do some re-indexing. I guess you'll have to re-index, at least from my understanding. Those who chose to index based off of the inscription number are now going to have to index off of block height and transaction history. How that's technically done, I actually have no idea because I'm not a dev, but this is what people had said. And apparently Domo had already prepared for this. They probably saw it coming already, especially with this creation of the Layer 1 Foundation, which is a cohort of all of the meta protocols that exist on top of ordinals. So that will be an interesting take, to say the least. I actually had to reach out to Bunzi as well and a few of my other dev friends to confirm that this is like an actual reality and that everything is really safe. And they said, yeah, it's just going to take some time for people to adjust. I feel bad for more of the builders in this space who had built a project off of inscription numbers, not even just a meta protocol. And this could have an effect on maybe their future outcome. of the trajectory. And, I'm speaking for people who probably haven't spoken up at all, because generally the smallest voices, don't really get to be heard, or they don't want to come on stage. And, it's tough. It could definitely prevent people from just continually building and just exit. But I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to need to hear some more experts. The fact, though, that Casey consistently bashes BRC20, also, Charlie Spears, who I'd had on my podcast, also bashes BRC20. And a lot of the dev side, they hate BRC20 because it's an inefficient protocol, at least in its current state, or the code is clunky, so they don't think that it's, quote unquote, pretty, and they want to upgrade it to a different way. And then us, who are probably sitting in the space, that have, purchased BRC20, which is, like 85 to 90% of all inscriptions that ever exist. We're saying that on the BRC20 side, you guys may hate it, but ordinals wouldn't be where it is without BRC20. It'd probably be a much, much smaller market without it. And so they feel, that they've been betrayed, even if it's a simple fix to re-index based off of the two other parameters. The fact that the way that it was presented makes it sound like this is like a backdoor and roundabout way for the mining, for like the people who run the mining pools or the devs behind the team, to kind of like eliminate BRC20 to create a different type of standard. And so I guess I think this is also one of like the subconscious underlying arguments that maybe is also really pissing people off at the end of the day. So we'll see more conversations at app.
So.
What do you say?
I know that you're big on BRC20s, and I think that just kind of part of the culture as to where Bitcoin is now, that they're anti BRC20. They're kind of anti a lot of these more speculative kind of layers on Bitcoin. But I think that forward looking, I think BRC20s obviously have a huge market as the Bitcoin community grows, and it kind of gets away from a lot of these kind of Bitcoin maxi super intense ideals. And so, like I said, it's tough to see exactly the way forward when everyone has such strong ideals one way or the other. But it's pretty clear to you and pretty clear to me that BRCs would be a huge catalyst for Bitcoin going forward. So kind of strange that they're so anti within the community itself.
Yeah, it really reflects on some of the other Bitcoin battles culturally, just about clunky code. And Udi Wertheimer had brought this up, and he portrayed it pretty solid during that space yesterday. He's mentioning that there are many bugs that are maintained within the actual Bitcoin core code, and the reason is that there was a compromise between the devs and the community, because the devs knew that if they had removed the bugs or they had done something differently, then there could have been a mass exit from Bitcoin from the users. And now it's pretty much too late to go fix those bugs because of how many blocks have been created and all of the different things that it could break the ecosystem. So this could be one of those situations, depending on what the compromise is at the end of the day. But, kind of moving on from that, because I do think it's going to get beaten to death over the next few weeks. There's actually a lot of other, Bitcoin related news that I had come across recently. One of them is this thing called atomicals, which is CPU mineable ARC20 tokens. So basically think of BRC20, but mineable ones as a meta protocol. It's pretty interesting. I'm actually going to go after this and try to figure out how to use a terminal to try to claim some of this. It says, as of last night, there was 18 out of 21,000 mints already claimed. It's a pure decentralized mint, provably no pre-mine. Anyone could claim mint by performing the Bitwork proof of work to claim 1,000 units per decentralized mint request. You contribute about 1 minute of CPU mining and fund with 1,000 Satoshis. See how it works for yourself. My favorite part of this, it's very similar to how BRC20 started. It says, disclaimer, this is only meant as educational and an experimental demonstration of ARC20. As we know, BRC20 was also the infamous quote of "This is an experiment," and it absolutely exploded. So, maybe this is a possible similar situation there. Again, another extension or a new standard to be compatible with BRC20, just showing the amount of activity that happens with the ecosystem. Also, in the world of BRC20s, because this is probably the biggest meta protocol by far on ordinals, the Tap exchange has gotten together, and this is, I don't believe this is actually created by Benny, who runs Track. This is by a different type of cohort. I was trying to listen to that space last weekend. So there's like a group of individuals who are creating an exchange for all of these new BRC20 extension tokens that were created by Tap, which has, I think, a few other upgradable features that includes an airdrop function and I believe a staking function as well. So I think this is also something to watch, which will be quite interesting to see just more BRC20 type projects popping up and growing the network. Chris, have you looked into any of these, or do you find any of them interesting?
I haven't checked them out specifically, but I think that you're right on point, as where that we're kind of at the state of the market where everyone's really bored and kind of keeping an ear out for that next big thing. And the narratives, they shift really, really quickly. So you're seeing some turmoil in BRC20 land, and then you're seeing kind of Frentech is still going pretty strong, but people are they were either early or they were late, or they might not want to get involved with it at this point in time. You're seeing, copycats pop up. You're trying some of those. People are kind of really looking for that next narrative. So it's definitely a good time to be kind of experimenting, trying out new things, and kind of seeing what pops up, because people are definitely bored and they're looking to put liquidity somewhere for sure.
This is why Frentech just absolutely explodes. It's funny that a bunch of the the larger crypto Twitter accounts who've been through multiple cycles, they talk about this idea of being in this stage of despair, which is probably where the whole entire market is right now, where most people fade these new ideas because they've been so burned or they're so down bad that you really miss what is really actually the beginning of the bull market. If you look at all of the largest gainers in the last market or in the last bull run, you had Axes, I think, went up like 10,000%. That was all. If you would have bought that during the depth of 2019, you would have been up. You'd probably be retired right now. Also, Matic, right, in the L2s. That's kind of a similar one. I think Matic was actually the best performing asset last year. One of them was up like 30,000% or something crazy. So these are the times to go experiment, especially when you look at the experimentals of those two different coins that I said. One is the top play to earn, I guess, fungible token, and then the other one, what was the top, might still be, I don't know, by market cap, L2 ecosystem token. So these could be potentially the same thing if Ordinal is going to continue to explode, as it has recently actually clawed back to become the number 2 most traded NFT ecosystem. Chris, how do you feel about that? Solana got flipped again with the NFTs.
Yeah, flipping it like a pancake back and forth. But that's like what's pretty cool is that you have all these ecosystems kind of blossoming within their own kind of borders, and then something like Emblem Vault kind of is working to bring all these different communities together under one roof. So it's cool to see grassroots adoption in all these different corners of the ecosystem, and those borders, they're going to get blurred as time goes by. So, it's pretty segmented. You have 1,500 people over here, 800 people over here, 3,000 people over here. But, we're kind of working against each other now, but, eventually we're going to be moving pretty much all in the same direction. So it's cool to see the grassroots adoption. It's cool to see the early stages of these communities forming, and pretty excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. Yeah, we have some Emblem updates for everyone. I'll be reading off here pretty shortly. 2 other Bitcoin kind of updates that I wanted to mention. One of the big ones, the Bitcoin Metaverse token is coming from an Animoca gaming studio, which is called Darewise. They're creating a game called Life Beyond. powered by Bitcoin ordinals. Although I think here the messaging is a little bit, it's a little bit more towards this marketability rather than, something kind of innovative. I read through the article talking about this metaverse game, and it says that they're creating a metaverse ecosystem that's using a first of its kind metaverse ecosystem token on Bitcoin. So it doesn't sound like it's going to be something similar to Bitmap. It sounds like they're just creating a game, and then they're going to use something similar to like a BRC20, but it's going to be probably their own standard that they're going to do. And I was listening to the Monday Ordinal show. I think Leo interviewed the CEO of the company, and that was kind of what he was leading on to, was that they were very interested in the ecosystem and that they're still kind of exploring it, and that this is going to be their first kind of entrance is using their token that is going to be powered by Ordinal. So however they go about that. But the fact that this is, I guess, backed by one of the largest, or if not the largest metaverse kind of studio in the ecosystem of Animoca Brands. As you know, they're a big backer of Other Side with Yuka Labs. They also funded and owned the Sandbox on Ethereum. I think there's a handful of other ones that are out there as well. So, I mean, this is the top metaverse company. So they are going to go explore. Hopefully it leads to some interesting capital that flows in and expands this kind of idea of a metaverse on Bitcoin. Because I don't think Bitmap is going to be the only metaverse that exists. Just as we've seen, BRC20 is not going to be the only fungible standard that exists. Maybe it is kind of more of that Pareto principle where it's 80-20 and it consumes 80%, of the volume, but there's still going to be an opportunity for others. And last, on the Interlay, which is a bridge that was built on Polkadot to bridge Bitcoin back and forth. They've now released their Layer 2 Bob network, which is Interlay seeks to empower developers with tools to drive innovation using the existing Bitcoin framework. This is one of those kind of multi-chain products that was created. It began on Polkadot, and now they're trying to bring everything together. It says Bob comes on the heels of last month's launch of Interlay's Bitcoin DeFi Hub. It's billed as Bitcoin Layer 2 network that introduced Rust smart contracts compatible with Bitcoin libraries such as Lightning and Ordinals. So obviously, also Solana is written in Rust. So this company is really trying to come in and build everything together and be this true, interoperable Bitcoin kind of ecosystem. The thing that's an issue with that is if you don't have that cultural layer and you just kind of build this big product out, it becomes very intimidating to go to. I even went on the website and, they have all of these DeFi pools that exist. They have the bridges, they have NFT ecosystem. It's just like there's so many options and it feels like there's no one really there. It has this kind of like ghost town type air to it where, unlike it with Ordinals, you start out small. You have this like very devout community come in and, grow with the entire ecosystem so that there's adoption and that there's people to go to and talk with. I was like trying to go through the Discord and there just like wasn't that much activity. So it doesn't really, exude that much type of confidence as well. Kind of moving on from Bitcoin, there's a lot of other stuff that's happened off in the ecosystem. I don't know if you guys saw, but kind of moving into the world of NFTs, Super Rare actually fired or laid off a lot of its employees. I think this is, it's very unfortunate, but I think it really speaks to where kind of NFTs are moving. This platform, Super Rare, right? It's created for artists. It also has a 10% royalty. And Adam and I talked about it, I think it was 2 weeks ago. There was a 24-hour period where they only had 0.8 ETH in sales on this one single platform, which is the go-to place for one-of-one art. So Super Rare John, who's one of the co-founders, he said, "I'm very sorry to share that today we are letting go a number of valued Super Rare Labs team members and friends. Everyone who has been a part of the journey has been instrumental in our success. And we thank you all. It's very, very tough times, to be building a marketplace. Super Rare is down bad. We saw Rareable come in and say that, they're moving to a royalty only enforced marketplace. Ab and I even had on the co-founder or founder of Rareable, Alex, came on the show a few weeks ago to kind of explain their entire thesis surrounding moving to an only or royalty only marketplace. I think it's still to be determined if that proves to be successful or not. It does not, in this current bear market, it doesn't encourage people to participate in royalty and paying royalties when everyone is down historically bad. From an Emblem Vault perspective, we see this happen consistently. People will use any type of tool that exists to try to circumvent royalties. So this is why we're personally trying to move towards, different types of business models, because this is just how crypto is. It's a game of cat and mouse, or whack-a-mole, to where users will find the cheapest route to transactions over time. I know, Chris, I know Solana was like the first place to get, or the first, I guess, blockchain to really, dive into getting rid of royalties. What happened over there as you were a heavy power user of Solana during that bull market and when they got rid of royalties?
Yeah, definitely. If things move super quick over on Solana, there's a lot of changes that can be made really, really quickly. So pretty unique. It often kind of moves ahead in the way that Ethereum does, just because the implementations kind of come and go rather quickly. But, it's similar where you debate endlessly on what the right route is. And then eventually they just upgraded to the programmable NFT standard. And so now royalties are enforced across the board on the new NFT standard for every collection.
Are people using that new standard?
Everybody is pretty much using the standard. So across the board, probably 90% plus of the collections. So royalties are pretty much completely back on Solana. So you're kind of going to see that going forward, where different chains are going to have kind of different strengths and different weaknesses. And so if you're an artist that wants to sell your art, that wants to make money from royalties, there's probably going to be a blockchain that enables that. You know what I mean? So it's all growing pains, and it was massive debates for a long time. Obviously, DGods and Magic Eden kind of front ran that whole kind of narrative, and then the market was dead for a few months, but it seems to be reviving pretty well over there. So, and as far as a lot of these marketplaces, that's what everyone wants to be. Everyone wants to be a marketplace, right? That's where you're going to make the most money. You're going to be the biggest players in the ecosystem. So you have to be well capitalized. And it's sad to see, the super rares and some of these other marketplaces that aren't as capitalized, losing ground. But you're fighting for a big piece of that pie. So unfortunately, probably going to see a little bit more of that kind of condensing and kind of, these marketplaces like OpenSea, Magic Eden, kind of the gold standards really kind of take more and more market share as people just kind of run out of funds. I'm pretty sure funding is at basically the lowest that it's been in like 5 years for crypto. So even the best teams are having insane troubles raising funds. And most of these funding announcements, like the blockchain capital announcement that came out, I think a little bit earlier this week, that was raised, months ago. So they're just announcing now.
To try to spark some life back into the community.
Yeah, exactly. And because the market was so tainted from the FTX SBF drama for so long, that announcing around then probably wouldn't have done anything to push the needle forward. So like funding is super dead. And these announcements that are coming out now, they were raised a while ago. And so trying to fuel a little bit of life back into it. But yeah, it's going to be a tough couple months for sure.
Yeah, funding's interesting. Xverse actually was in the same situation. Xverse is the top, I guess, Ordinal's wallet, web extension wallet. They announced their funding raise, I think like a month or two ago, but I know Gossamer Capital and a few of these other people invested in them literally like last year. So they held it off for almost a year before they announced the whole $5 million raise. Although I know raising $5 million at the bottom of a bear market is probably takes a long time and it's a lot of conversations. I mean, from the Emblem side, we've talked with a lot of these different VCs and capital funds about, funding and interest, and a lot of these teams just aren't interested in giving out too much capital. It's very tight at the moment. So pretty interesting.
Yeah, even seeing like a lot of $2 million rounds, even 5 million seems to be pretty heavy. So almost as more of like a bridge to see where the market's going to be in the next 6 to 8 months, something like that. But yeah, $5 million round in today's environment is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm gonna save a lot of the topics for tomorrow, but I'm gonna round it out with a little bit of an Emblem update. So first, thanks for everyone who hung out this entire time. XCEO for hating my garbage takes every day. I really appreciate it. We'll continue on with the garbage takes every day. So please, yeah, give me those spiteful retweets.
I got love, man. I got love for you, man. So
I know, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I know, man. And I was just, I was changing the diaper, and then it just dawned on me, like, sometimes leaders are like diapers. Their usefulness runs out when the diaper is soiled, and then we need a new diaper. And I want to leave you, ladies and gentlemen, with that thought in mind in regards to Mr. Casey Rodermo. Thank you.
Ooh, diapers, man. What a line there. So you guys are probably wondering who Chris is. Chris is on stage. Chris is actually going to be joining us at Emblem Vault. So he's going to be, the 5th team member to join the team. The newest one since Adam and I joined in November. So you'll be seeing a lot more of him. Chris and I go back. He lives in Vegas, where I live. Our last business adventure called Native Research we did together in Las Vegas. One of the most knowledgeable people I know, been in the space for a long time. I think 2016, around the same time that I got in. And so, yeah, excited to see where that goes in the trajectory. If you go to my YouTube channel, we have interviews together and stuff like that. But you'll be seeing more as we expand the role over time. Chris will be joining us as a non-dev role. So what that means is he's going to go through multiple training periods, or I guess just like monitoring, because we have to figure out, what's the best strength, what's your interest, and also what's the most compatible position in Emblem to satisfy both of those first two. So very fun time to do it with your friends, right? If you didn't know, I'm the youngest person on the Emblem team by like literally 13 years. So nice to have somebody my age that I can talk with that doesn't have kids. Emblem, from a development standpoint, I know I get blown up every freaking day about the migration stuff. Last week, we made a lot of strides, a lot. We deployed, minting and vaulting for fake rares, for fake commons, for Age of Rust, and for dank rares. So vaulting and unvaulting is there. We had to work through a bunch of these UI bugs, which we got past. We also added traits to all of those as well. As you know, we also got the Pepe and fake rare collections verified finally. If you know, dude, we have Emblem now, we have a direct channel with OpenSea, so it kind of helps accelerate this. But man, getting to that direct channel of OpenSea to where they respond within a few minutes, that took like a year of freaking building up to get to that. So there's a lot of things between Emblem and OpenSea that aren't compatible. And this is what causes some of those delays as well, because of how Emblem interacts with all these different blockchains that OpenSea doesn't necessarily have support for. So there's a lot of these, metadata issues that kind of populate where, we're pulling the images for rare Pepes from XChain, but then OpenSea and Seaport has never interacted with XChain. So there has to be, this kind of like period to where they have to kind of figure out to make sure that it's compatible. So there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that, causes some of these delays that we have to work through. So a lot of them are in our control, but then some of these, as well as these other systems, have to also kind of come in and they have to work with us to make sure that it's upgraded. Right now, this week, and as of now, the dev team is working on batch minting, right? So the rare Pepe collection, or there's 22,000 rare Pepe vaults that exist in the legacy collection, right? Moving all of those over in one transaction is something we're working towards. So you'll probably see some of the smaller collections batch matched first, like Fakers has 1,700. I think Bitcoin Stamps has like 1,500. Dank Commons has like 300. So we'll be working on that. We're also working on the ERC 721A vaulting standard that is quite interesting within itself. That means cheaper minting fees. So if you know how ERC 721A works, it's what Azuki actually created, where it gets cheaper the more that you mint inside of one transaction. So if you, let's say you mint, or if you create one vault that's $10, essentially it gets cheaper over time. So if you go mint 100 vaults, it costs like $200, right? Versus creating one for $10. That's kind of how ERC 721A works. So it's going to be a better experience for everybody. So once we get that done, right, then we have to create the whole vaulting and UI experience with that. And then all the migrations happen last. And the reason why it happens last is because once, we put those new vaults in wallets of everybody else, then it's out of our control to how they want to interact. So we just got to make sure that everything's optimized. So a lot of fun times. We are working on everything, I promise. And I'm going to end the show here today. Dude, you guys are awesome. Make sure you give Chris a follow, give Emblem Vault a follow. We do this show Tuesday through Thursday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. That's when we begin. Generally do an hour to an hour and a half. This will be something new. This is our week number 2 as we build out everything. Usually Adam's here with me. He ditched me to go hang out with Art Gnome and Von Mises. So I think I'm going to go roll over into that space to listen to them talk with some legends. And appreciate all of you guys. You guys rock. If you have any questions, always shoot me a DM. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.